The story begins on a calm Friday afternoon. The parents were getting ready to leave for a weekend trip, leaving the house in the hands of their children. The moment was exciting for the kids because this was the very first time they were trusted to stay home alone. The parents gave a few final instructions: keep the doors locked, don't stay up too late, and remember to behave. With a smile and a wave, they left, and the car disappeared down the street. Inside the house, silence spread. For a while, everything felt normal. The children sat in the living room, chatting, laughing, and enjoying the sense of freedom that came with having the entire house to themselves. But soon, a thought sparked between them. What if they invited a few friends over? It sounded harmless, just a way to make the weekend more fun. After all, no one was there to say no. At first, the plan was small. Just 2 or 3 friends, nothing too big. But as text messages started spreading, the idea grew. Friends replied quickly, excited to join. The atmosphere of the house began to change. The once quiet and peaceful rooms now carried a buzz of anticipation. The kids cleaned up the living room, set up some music, and looked at each other with wide grins. Tonight, they thought, would be unforgettable. They felt the thrill of breaking the rules, the excitement of doing something forbidden. Every passing minute brought them closer to the arrival of their friends. The sound of the doorbell ringing for the first time made their hearts race. The fun was about to begin, and they had no idea what this night was going to turn into. The parents' absence created freedom, but it also opened the door to something much darker than they could ever imagine. As the evening shadows stretched across the neighborhood, the teenagers sat together in the empty house, exchanging glances filled with excitement. The silence was heavy, but their minds were already racing with ideas. One of them finally whispered the thought that was on everyone's mind. Why don't we invite some friends over? At first, there was hesitation. They knew their parents wouldn't approve, but the temptation was too strong. The house was theirs for the whole weekend. No rules, no supervision. The thrill of secrecy made the idea impossible to resist. With a few quick taps on their phones, text messages began flying out. Come over tonight. Parents are gone. Let's have fun. The replies were almost instant. Friends loved the idea and promised to come soon. A rush of adrenaline surged through the teens as they realized the plan was set in motion. They quickly began preparing the house. Lights were adjusted, snacks were arranged, and a playlist of loud, energetic songs was chosen. Every detail added to the sense of rebellion. The first knock on the door made their hearts skip a beat. They opened it to see smiling faces, laughter, and the sound of sneakers running inside. More and more friends arrived, each one adding to the growing energy. The once quiet living room was now alive with chatter, laughter, and the beats of music echoing through the walls. The thrill of doing something forbidden made the atmosphere electric. They danced, played games, and felt as if nothing could go wrong. For the first time, they experienced what it felt like to truly break free of parental control. But what they didn't realize was that with every laugh, every loud song, and every careless step, they were drawing closer to something unexpected. The night that began as fun would soon turn into something far more chilling than they ever imagined. Outline 3. Detailed script, 335 words. The living room was no longer just a quiet family space. It had transformed into the heart of a secret party. Music blasted from the speakers, filling every corner of the house with thumping beats. Colorful lights from someone's portable disco lamp bounced off the walls, creating patterns that danced along with the people. The teenagers laughed, shouted, and moved with the rhythm, their faces glowing with excitement. The energy was contagious. Some were dancing wildly in the middle of the room, while others sat on the couch sharing jokes and snacks. The sound of clinking soda cans and bursts of laughter made the house feel alive in a way it never had before. For that moment, it was as if the whole world existed only inside those walls. Every new arrival added more life to the gathering. Backpacks and jackets piled up in the hallway, shoes scattered near the door, and the smell of pizza drifted in from the kitchen. It was chaos, but the kind of chaos that made teenagers feel free. They weren't worried about tomorrow or about what their parents would say. This was their night, and it was perfect. Phones came out, recording videos and snapping pictures, capturing smiles that looked unstoppable. Someone even suggested playing pranks around the house, and everyone cheered at the idea. The louder the music became, the more they felt untouchable, like nothing could interrupt their fun. But behind the excitement, there were tiny signs that something wasn't right. A soft creak upstairs, a door clicking shut on its own, and the faint sound of something moving in the hallway went unnoticed. Everyone was too caught up in the moment to pay attention. The party had begun, and the atmosphere was electric. But little did they know, the fun was only the beginning, and the night would soon take a darker, more terrifying turn. The party was at its peak. Music echoed through the walls, laughter filled the air, and the teenagers felt unstoppable. But in the middle of all that fun, something strange began to creep in. It started small, barely noticeable at first. The lights flickered for a brief second, just long enough to make a few people pause. Someone joked about the old house wiring, and the laughter continued. Then came the sound, a faint creak from upstairs, like footsteps moving slowly across the wooden floor. Everyone froze for a moment, exchanging nervous glances. Probably the wind, one of them said, trying to shake it off. But deep down, no one could explain how the noise had come from inside the house. Minutes later, the television turned on by itself, flickering with static before shutting down again. Gasps filled the room. This time, it wasn't so easy to laugh it off. A chill swept across the room, as if the air had suddenly grown colder. The music that had once felt exciting now seemed too loud, too harsh, echoing against the uneasy silence that followed each strange event. Some of the guests whispered about leaving, but the others insisted it was just their imagination. After all, it was just a party. What could possibly go wrong? Trying to distract themselves, they turned the music up even louder, drowning out the unsettling atmosphere. But the house wasn't done with them. A door slammed shut upstairs, making everyone jump. Someone swore they saw a shadow move in the hallway, though no one was there when they checked. Fear began to replace excitement, and the once thrilling party started to feel like a trap. The teenagers had no idea that these were just the first warnings. Something else was inside the house, and it was only beginning to make itself known. The atmosphere inside the house had changed completely. What had started as laughter and music was now filled with tension and unease. The teenagers tried to continue the party, but the flickering lights made it impossible to ignore that something was wrong. Every time the bulbs dimmed and buzzed, their hearts skipped a beat. Suddenly, the living room went dark for just a second before the lights blinked back on. Gasps filled the room as everyone glanced around nervously. Some laughed awkwardly, pretending not to be afraid, but the fear in their eyes betrayed them. It wasn't just the lights, it was the feeling that someone or something was watching. Then it happened. One of the teens screamed, pointing at the hallway. A tall, dark shadow moved across the wall and disappeared into the corner. Panic erupted. "Did you see that?" Voices shouted over each other. A few friends ran to check, but the hallway was empty, nothing but silence and still air. Yet the sense of being watched only grew stronger. The music was turned off now. Every small sound echoed in the silence. The creak of the floorboards, the ticking of the clock, the wind scratching against the window. Nobody was smiling anymore. Fear had replaced excitement. A group of them huddled together on the couch, whispering in fear. Some wanted to leave, but others argued that it was just their imagination. Still, no one could explain why the lights flickered or why shadows seemed to move on their own. Each minute felt heavier than the last. Every glance over the shoulder was met with nothing, but the dread only deepened. The house felt alive, as though it was breathing with them, watching them. The party was no longer fun. It had turned into a nightmare, and everyone knew something terrifying was coming next. Fear had gripped every corner of the house. The music was gone, the laughter had vanished, and only whispers and trembling breaths remained. Everyone was on edge, waiting for the next strange event. Then, without warning, the lights shut off completely, plunging the house into darkness. Screams filled the room as phones lit up one by one, their screens casting shaky beams of light across frightened faces. In that dim glow, something horrifying was revealed. At the end of the hallway stood a figure, motionless, tall, and cloaked in shadows. For a few seconds, no one dared to breathe. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, the figure stepped forward before disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared. Panic exploded. Some ran to the door, fumbling with the lock, while others froze in terror. The house itself seemed to close in on them, doors slamming, windows rattling, and footsteps echoing from places no one could see. And then came the twist no one expected. One of the friends, pale and trembling, admitted a terrible secret. This house isn't empty, it never was. Everyone turned to him in shock as he revealed what he knew. Years ago, someone had died in this house under mysterious circumstances, and ever since, people had reported strange happenings. His parents had warned him never to stay here overnight, but he hadn't told anyone. The realization hit like a thunderclap. The shadow they had seen wasn't just their imagination. It wasn't a prank. It was real. The house had a presence, something that didn't want them there. The teenagers stood frozen in disbelief, their fear now mixed with regret. What they thought would be a fun night had turned into a horrifying truth. They weren't alone, and whatever was in the house was making sure they would never forget this night. The house had fallen into complete chaos. The teenagers no longer felt like they were at a party. They felt like prisoners in a place that didn't belong to them anymore. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound made their hearts pound faster. Some cried, others clutched their phones, desperately trying to call for help, but the signal was gone. They were trapped. Then, suddenly, the house grew silent. The banging stopped. The footsteps faded. For a moment, they thought it was over. Slowly, a few of them began to relax, whispering nervously that maybe it had all just been in their heads. But that fragile hope shattered instantly. From the staircase, a loud creak echoed, followed by the sound of heavy breathing. All eyes turned to the darkness above. And there it was, a figure descending the stairs, half hidden in shadow, its movements slow and deliberate. The air turned ice cold, and no one could move. In a panic, one teenager finally rushed to the door and pulled with all their strength. This time, the lock gave way, and the group stormed out into the night, screaming and stumbling across the yard. They didn't stop running until they reached the street, gasping for breath under the safety of the streetlights. When they turned back, the house stood still and silent, as though nothing had happened. But through the upstairs window, they swore they saw it. The same dark figure, standing perfectly still, watching them from above. The night had changed everything. What was supposed to be harmless fun had turned into a nightmare none of them would ever forget. The memory of the flickering lights, the shadows, and that figure in the hallway would haunt them for years to come. And deep down, they all knew the truth. Some doors, once opened, should never be touched again.